A lot of people drive to their office, park in a spot, get in an elevator, go up to their floor, sit at their desk, and leave. They never interact with either other people in their companies or anybody else in that area. And I think now people really are interested in connecting to other organizations, to other people. And so we're starting to see the creation of precincts, right? Where you might have multiple companies in a shared area, and there's a food court we all share, there's a gym in one building. And one of the things it's doing is it's blending all these different people together, like Here East does beautifully, and just creates a new, like an energy and a vibe that is exciting and people want to be part of.
Kay Sargent, welcome to Visionary.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, you've been at the forefront of workplace design for years. And of course, the office used to look very different to the way it does now, or at least the way it looks here at Here East. Talk to me first about the evolution that you've witnessed.
I've actually been a practicing designer for over 40 years. So hopefully if you do something for long enough, you become pretty good at it, you become an expert at it. I think over the years, I've designed every kind of space you can imagine on almost every continent. And for the last 10 years, I've really overseen our global workplace practice. So, when you have clients that have millions of square feet of space, they don't like a lot of surprises. They kind of want to know what's coming. So we really have focused a lot on future casting, on what is coming, what they need to know, and just some of the ways that they can work better as they go forward into the future. There's kind of been some common themes, but I would say that we are right now at a point where there are some major shifts that are happening. I think there's co-working and COVID and artificial intelligence. All of those things are shaking the way that we have traditionally perceived of how we should be designing and creating new opportunities.
And one of those changes is that we're starting to see workplace design reflect the individual needs of people, particularly neurodivergent people. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so as a designer, I've always kind of leaned into the science of design and kind of understanding that every space that we're designing absolutely has an impact on the people that we're designing it for. But about 9 years ago, I was in a room with a client who has millions of square feet all over the world, and they asked a very simple question. How do you design for someone that's ADHD? And I had an okay answer to that question because I also happen to be the mother of 5 children, but I didn't have a great answer. And so we started to dig into it, and what we found was a massive gap of how the built environment is really impacting not just people that are neurodivergent, but really every single one of us are being impacted by sound, temperature, light, and it just seems to be more and more overwhelming. And so if we want to create spaces where people can thrive, we need to have a deeper understanding about how those elements in the built environment are actually impacting people.
Just so everyone's clear, how would you describe that term neuro-inclusive?
So let's just say that we are all neurodiverse. We all think and process and communicate, and our bodies function in different ways and our brains function in different ways, but we're not necessarily all neurodivergent. So people that are neurodivergent tend to think, process, communicate, interact with things and individuals and the built environment in a way that is considered to be kind of outside of the norm. And in many cases, they might either be hypersensitive or hyposensitive. So people that are hypersensitive are sensory avoiders. They tend to be overwhelmed by too much light or sound or noise, where people that are hyposensitive, they actually might need more sensory stimulation. They might want to move and fidget. They might want to listen to music. They might be much more physically engaged or more tactically oriented. And so our challenge is we have to design spaces that accommodate everyone wherever they are on that spectrum of needs.
It's certainly something that I'm noticing people talk about a lot more. I remember working in an office years ago, and we were banned from wearing headphones, and I could never understand it, because for me, listening to certain pieces of music really helps me focus much more than the hum of a photocopier or whatever. So What are the examples of particular needs that some people might have from their work environment?
Yeah, so if you think about this in most spaces, a lot of people now have phone rooms where people that, okay, I need to block out the sounds, I need to block out the noise, I could go into this room and I can function and focus. But if you are hypersensitive, you may not want to be in an enclosed box. In fact, our research shows more people are bothered by being in confined spaces than being in open spaces. We just have to do a better job of designing open spaces so that people can thrive in them. But if I design a space for someone who needs to focus and I create a phone room, but then I put a wild pattern or a crazy texture on the wall or a bright graphic, I literally have short-circuited the person that I've designed that space for. And so it's really about understanding how we're all being impacted and intentionally designing space to maximize human performance and potential, and really truly understanding, social spaces might want to be a little bit buzzier. They might want to have a little bit of music. They might want to have a little bit more pops of color and vibrancy, where spaces where people are concentrating or focusing uh, might be the opposite of that.
So, I mean, it's fair to say there's no one size fits all.
One size misfits all. That's absolutely what we would say. And I think, look, here's the thing. I think in the 1950s, you could probably define who the average worker was and what the average thing they were doing. We now are so diverse as a population and as a community, and we're doing so many different things, you can't really define that. And I think a lot of people are trying to standardize the workplace so it's equal, but not necessarily equitable for everyone. And by doing that, we've dumbed it down to the lowest common denominator, and we're creating spaces that really don't meet people that have kind of on the fringe needs or have any kind of specific needs. And so we'd say one size misfits all. And we need to understand that as people, we are complicated. We are unique. And if we want people to thrive, then we need to create spaces where they can do so.
I read something that you said, design for the extreme, benefit the mean. Can you explain what you mean by that?
So it's kind of like the curb cut analogy, where a curb cut doesn't just benefit someone in a wheelchair. It benefits somebody with a stroller or with a rolling bag or someone with mobility challenges. When we design for people that have extreme needs, I either might need more sound or I might need less of it. Every single one of us can benefit because people that are neurodivergent tend to be the canary in the coal mine. They're going to feel something first and they're going to feel it more acutely. But it doesn't mean that the rest of us aren't being negatively impacted by that as well. But what might be annoying to someone that is neurotypical can be debilitating to someone that is neurodivergent. But we all benefit when we create these spaces because we all have sensitivities. And I think so many of us feel like we have no control, that we have been masking and just trying to block it out as best as we can, but it is absolutely taking a toll on our mental health, our well-being, our ability to concentrate and focus and to be productive.
People often think of flexible working as simply working at home, but actually, a lot of companies have started giving workers more autonomy in the way that they work, whether it's no more fixed desks or perhaps outside spaces. Do you think that neuro-inclusivity is something that all companies should really be thinking about?
Absolutely, because right now, when we started this research 9 years ago, it was considered that 1 in 8 people were neurodivergent. Now the common held belief is 1 in 5, but our research is showing it's far more prominent than that. And 2 new studies just came out, one in the UK, one in the US, that said that 50% of 20-year-olds have identify as being neurodivergent. Because in the older generation, it just wasn't really diagnosed. And so I don't think there's this big increase in diagnoses. I think there's an increase in awareness is what's happening. And the older generation might have just been dealing with it or sucking it up for a long time, and it doesn't mean it's not impacting them. And so we are all being impacted. And so anything and everything that any company can do that worries and cares about productivity and the well-being of their workforce should be thinking about how do we create spaces where we have some ability to have options and choice and control over that sensory stimulation that is just bombarding us constantly in the workspace.
This is obviously good for employees, but I know that your book covers how this can actually help companies too. Tell me about that.
We have a whole chapter in the book dedicated to why this is good for business. So when companies are more inclusive, they get a wider spectrum of ideas. People that are neurodivergent bring a lot of talents to the workplace. They often have the ability to find complex patterns in data sets. They might be bigger risk takers. They have a strong sense for justice. They can think outside of the box. They tend to derail group think, which I think is a good thing. And they tend to bring a lot of skill sets. So SAP, EY, and Microsoft have had a program for over 10 years really targeting autistic individuals, and the results that they're getting from those groups is significantly improved performance. And not only that, it creates a sense of pride within the organization that this company cares about us as people and as humans, and we're doing the right thing. So we would always say it's not just the right thing to do, it's absolutely 100% good for business as well.
You mentioned Microsoft there. Tech obviously plays a huge role in the modern workplace, and perhaps the most obvious examples are the more annoying ones. Interruptions from phones, too many emails, and so on. How much of a role does technology play in adapting workplaces for neurodivergent people?
Yeah, so technology can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it has destigmatized people that might have a pad that they needed to use to help navigate. So now everybody is walking around with pads, so they don't stand out as much. And it can help with like closed captioning or recording of meetings or breaking down tasks or helping with a tone in an email that maybe my social skills aren't where they need to be, and it can just kind of help me function a little bit better or break things down for me. But on the other side, it tends to be a little bit more addictive for people that are neurodivergent. They can kind of be a little bit more isolated, kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit more. And so we have to be really careful about how we're using it. But there's a lot of amazing ways that technology today can help individuals to really, truly be more inclusive and welcoming.
So, good design is one thing, but I suppose it can only go so far as the workplace's overall culture. So, what role then does leadership play?
Yeah. So we talk about the three-legged stool. Our expertise, we're designers and architects. That's really our focus and our expertise. But the three-legged stool basically is operations, environment, and adjustments. So we need to really address the operational side, the training, the onboarding, the recruitment, to make sure that people are welcome into the organization and can thrive there. But then we need to make sure that the built environment supports them, so we're not taking a freshwater fish and throwing them into salt water. And even if we address the environment and the operations, we need to then understand that we're all unique and different, and you might want noise canceling headphones. I might prefer loop earplugs. Somebody else might want music. Somebody else doesn't want anything touching their ears at all, right? So little adjustments that we can make for individuals. And I think we're on a massive educational campaign because there is a huge lack of awareness and understanding around this topic. And when we can share with leaders, it's kind of amazing just to kind of see all the light bulbs going off in the room. I think we were speaking the other day to a group of 450 individuals. And in the beginning, somebody said, "How many of you know what the term neurodiversity is?" And only 10% of the people in the room raised their hand. At the end of that hour presentation, the same person asked, "All right, well, how many of you guys are actually impacted by this?" And 90% of the hands went up. And so, somewhere in that time frame, not only did they realize what it was, but how they actually were personally being impacted by it, either themselves or a family member or a colleague, that they realized it's kind of everywhere. And I think we helping educate people around this is the first step. about awareness and understanding.
Obviously, you can't redesign every office everywhere, but is there a major thing that you think can really help most workplaces?
Give people some options, choice, and control. So if you're a company and you get a new employee and you randomly decide, all right, this desk is open, you're sitting here. Good, good luck. But you have now sat them where their back is exposed to a lot of people and they may not feel psychologically safe having their back exposed. Or you sat them right across from a conference room with lots of noise coming out of it, and I'm sensitive to sound. Or I'm on a corridor where people are constantly walking by and I'm distracted by that visual stimulation. That person's ability to function at a high level has just plummeted. But if we have some choice, people will naturally navigate to a space that feels more comfortable for them. I always use this analogy. If you and I were to go to lunch and I said, hey, Georgina, do you have any preferences about where we sit? Most people will be like, well, yeah, no, not really. But the second you walk into that restaurant, instinctively we are all scouting the scene. There's a child over there. I want to sit away, or I want to sit with my back to the. I don't want to sit next to the kitchen. I don't want to sit here. Right? We instinctively will navigate, even though we can't necessarily articulate why, because we've gotten so good at suppressing all of this. We're really not in touch with our sensory triggers in many cases. But giving people options and choice enables people to navigate and choose. And even if then I decide, okay, this is where I'm going to sit all day long, I got to choose that space and it will probably meet my requirements and my needs at a far greater level than if somebody randomly assigns it to me. So empower people and give people a little choice.
Such good advice. So, with all the change that we're seeing now, some of it welcome, some not, how do you see the office of the future? And are we all going to be glued to our desks staring at 3 or 4 screens?
It's interesting because this is one of the places where I actually think science fiction is getting it wrong. So science fiction historically does a great job of predicting technology. Think about Dick Tracy with his watch, think about Star Trek or the Jetsons. They predicted a lot of the things that we have today. But where they all failed miserably is the social aspect. You think about women in any of those shows and how they were portrayed versus, the reality of roles today. And I think we underestimate humans. And so in science fiction, you see a lot of metallic, high, super computerized, darker spaces with lots of screens everywhere. I don't think that's what we're seeing. We have this thing called high tech equals high touch. The more high tech we go, the more we as humans instinctively push back and want things that are more organic and real. And so we're actually seeing the rise of spaces that include more biophilia, that are introduce more elements of hospitality and are more casual. Biophilia, so plants, nature, elements that remind us and connect us back to the natural world. And we see kind of this rise in hospitality and this rise of kind of the maker movement and things that are true and authentic. People want spaces that they will inherently be comfortable in, not tin boxes with computers everywhere. That we don't necessarily relate to. So we think that workplaces are going to basically evolve to be a cultural platform for what your company stands for and believes, not necessarily the only place you work, but it is the place where you are coming to either connect with others, to highlight your brand and your mission, to bring people together. And as more and more people are leaving communities. Not as many people are going to church. Not as many people are active. People are doing things more online. The office is a place where people are coming together and connecting. And so creating it as a cultural platform for what a company believes is one of the things we really see. We also see this movement towards, I don't have to own everything. I just have to have access to it. So more sharing, more community centers and that central business district really evolving to becoming the social business district.
So I remember when the big tech companies were really taking off and people were installing slides in the office. Google even has a rowing boat in one of its meeting rooms here in London. How much of that is genuine design as opposed to just a gimmick?
Okay, so actually, where a lot of that originated was American Online, AOL. When AOL started, at that time, I know that like hard to believe, but at that time, graduates from college all wanted to work for financial institutions. Nobody wanted to work for a tech company because that was high risk. It's like, what is that, right? And they couldn't hire anybody that was already out of college because they didn't have the skill set. So they needed to attract college graduates. And when they were going to the campuses, they realized, oh, these college common areas, this, these are fun, funky spaces. Well, maybe if we design our offices to look like that, it'll feel more natural to them and they'll be more interested in coming to work for us than having to put on a suit and go work for a big finance. So it was really a drive to attract people right out of college. But I also have this whole philosophy that companies mature just like people. And what a young company can do is different than a company that's 20 years old or 40 or 50 years old. And what's happened is all of those tech companies have matured. And some of those early spaces that were playful, they're trying to hold on to some of that, but they're a different company now. And I think the other thing we're seeing is in some cases, those spaces are designed to attract people right out of college to stay as long as you can in the office because we're trying to get as much out of you as possible before you jump ship because there's a lot of churn in those spaces. But if you're a pharma company and you don't want somebody like sleeping in the office and being there all day long because you don't want them to burn out after 2 years. You're not trying to suck as much out in a short period of time. You want longevity. Then you're going to have very different amenities that support that lifestyle that you want. And so I think people need to stop looking at companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook and say, whatever they're doing, we should do that. The most important thing is to know thyself and be true and authentic to who you are.
I don't know if you've visited Here East yet.
Yes, I
Oh,
have.
you have?
Yeah.
Well, then I'm sure you'll agree that it's a really well thought out mix of companies in tech and innovation, but also arts and creativity. Do you think that mixing with people from different worlds also plays a role in the design of a good workspace? I mean, it's obviously tempting for some companies to fill their offices with a particular kind of person that they think best represents their brand. But I think visiting places with a broader mix really shows that that kind of monoculture really isn't suited to today's world. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it really plays on that whole notion of co-working spaces. And one of the things that people really loved about co-working spaces is just that mixture of energy and different kinds of people and just that stimulation in those conversations. And so when we talk about you don't have to own everything, like access is the new ownership, a lot of people drive to their office, park in a spot, get in an elevator, go up to their floor, sit at their desk, and leave. They never interact with either other people in their companies or anybody else in that area. And I think now people really are interested in connecting to other organizations, to other people. And so we're starting to see the creation of precincts, right? Where you might have multiple companies in a shared area and there's a food court we all share. There's a gym in one building. There's something else in another space that we really kind of like might be a tricked out conference room that we all have access to. And one of the things it's doing is it's blending all these different people together, like Here East does beautifully, and just creates a new, like an energy and a vibe that is exciting and people want to be part of.
Another thing that I think a lot of workplaces get wrong is the meeting place, a central location that creates those water cooler moments where everyone overlaps, regardless of their place in the company. In fact, Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, told me that at CERN, the invention probably wouldn't have come about unless he'd had access to that main coffee area. So it's really important.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I mean, a lot of places are actually designed. Um, if you're looking for quick ideation and speed to market, there's actually this whole notion of getting people together in these tight little groups that you spend so much time together, like scrums. You spend so much time together, you start to think alike, you start to answer each other's questions, and then you can expedite thought leadership much more because you build these bonds and connections and this trust. It's kind of like the Manhattan Project, right? Bring a bunch of brilliant people together, put them in a space together, and, they start living, breathing, thinking alike. And that really kind of drives some innovation because it's a safe zone, but it's, this amazing creative zone. And so there's a lot of desire, I think, today for that cross-pollination of bringing different ideas together and different people together to kind of emulate that kind of environment.
Finally, Kay, I have to know, what does your office look like?
Well, we have 26 offices all around the world. Some of them are in homage to beautiful 1950s architecture. Some of them are absolutely cutting-edge workplace design. But I think architects and designers, we tend to have a lot of space for creativity. We have a lot of wall space where, you come in and you can see all the projects that we've worked on, we are working on, a lot of information sharing. We tend to be very visual people, and we really kind of focus on bringing our teams together and to create the most exciting spaces we can have for our teams.
Excellent. Thank you, Kay. And remind us, what's the title of your book?
Yes, the title is Designing Neuro-Inclusive Workplaces, and you can get it at most online bookstores, Amazon, a variety of places. We actually realize it's a horrible title because it's not just about designing and it's not just about workplaces, but uh, you always have to pick the name first and then you do it, and it's like, wow, at the end it's like, wow, this has a lot of other stuff in it. Okay, but we're just going to go with that title, so there it is. But yes, Designing Neuro-Inclusive Workplaces. And thank you so much for having me on. It's really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Thank you, Kay.